respondent or classical conditioning. So the classical conditioning, everybody knows about Pavlov's dog studies, where he would give the dog something to eat, or let the dog smell the treat, and the dog would start to salivate, and he would ring a bell. So it got to the point that he could just ring the bell without presenting the actual treat, and the dogs would start to salivate just based on the fact that they heard the bell ring. These are our dogs, that's Molly and Maddie, and they do similar things when you go in the kitchen and say, does anybody want a treat? They know that word and they come ready for their treats. So that is classical conditioning, and it involves innate stimulus responses that we normally call reflexes. They're things you don't have much control over. Reinforcement is a key element in operant conditioning in most behavior change programs. This is a process by which a behavior is strengthened. When we talk about reinforcers and punishers, reinforcement makes the behavior more likely to occur, whereas a punisher makes it less likely to occur. If the behavior is followed closely in time by a stimulus and that results in an increase in the future frequency, then that stimulus is a positive reinforcer. If the removal of an event serves as a reinforcer, this is termed negative reinforcement. So a negative reinforcement kind of sounds oxymoronic. So like, wait, it's negative, but it's reinforcing. Well, what we're talking about is that we take away something, and by taking that away, we are reinforcing the behavior. For example, Lisa and I love Joe T. Garcia's Mexican food. Got a picture of it there. In fact, I'm hungry right now. That looks good. But if I got severe indigestion every time I went to eat that, well, I could take Tums before I ate and then not get the indigestion. So I'm taking something away, the indigestion, which reinforces my love of Joe T. Garcia's Mexican food. So that's an example of negative reinforcement. It's making me more likely to go there because I can take away something bad that happens. Punishment is the process by which a consequence immediately follows behavior and decreases the future frequency of that behavior. Again, stimulus can be added, positive punishment, or it can be removed, a negative punishment. And the book talks about some of the different types of punishers out there. Extinction is a technical term to describe the procedure of withholding, discontinuing, and reinforcement of a previously reinforced behavior, which results in the decrease of that behavior, and then that behavior is said to be extinguished. I know from discussion Lisa and I had, I think it was yesterday, that there's actually a question on the diagnostician's exam, practice exam, about extinction, that it's in there. We like extinction. We like extinction better than punishment, because sometimes the punishment procedures are deemed unethical or coercive, and some of them that used to be used are prohibited in some places. But we need to be careful with extinction because it's one of those things that's probably going to get worse before it gets better. They call that an extinction burst, and that's when a temporary increase in the frequency or the intensity or the duration of a behavior that we're trying to extinguish. As they start to see that behavior is going away, it's likely to peak and then drop off again after that. So observations and controversies about it. Well, as we said, there's some controversy about the aversive stimuli that used to be used. Then ABA kind of became the flavor of the month. It had widespread acceptance, lots of use among the autism crowd, and it still does, but I don't think it's at the peak that it was maybe 10 years ago. Interesting study came out last year where adults who have autism and who were treated with ABA as a child, the majority of those adults that were surveyed said that they felt like ABA had actually had a detrimental effect on their lives. So certainly there'll be, and there's actually 2 studies that have found that same thing, and certainly there'll be more. I've got a but in there because some of the people who have reviewed this article say that they didn't like the methods that were used, and you always get into issues when you start having self-report in a survey type format and that sort of thing. There's also a big battle going on between ABA proponents and the people that are proponents of the TEACH method that came out of University of North Carolina. Each one says theirs is better and all that. So you've got some of that controversy going on.
Dr. Cavan,
Yes.
did the adults that were surveyed, did they say why they thought it had an adverse effect on them? What about it?
I'm not sure. I haven't actually read the article. I just looked at the abstract of it, so I haven't read it in depth, but I would like to know that. And I'd like to know why there are people that are criticizing this article say that it might not be good science. So we'll see. Anybody else? Thank you for the question. One of the things that we find often in schools is that schools will find an article they like or a program that they have heard of and say, well, if that worked there, then it'll work here. A district I used to be in read an article about a school district in California that changed all of their everything up to high school into like a 1 through 8 school, where instead of having several elementaries with only grades, and then the middle school, they would have these kids in one school from 1st grade to 8th grade. So the teachers really got to know those kids. That made it more like the old-fashioned small schools and all that. So the district I was in said, well, we see that there's a problem with our transitions from going to one school to the next. We need to adopt this, but we can't really do it up through high school. But let's go from our K through 4 campuses and then an intermediate campus. Let's push all that back, and we'll go pre-K through 6 on all the different elementaries and the former intermediate school. So they take one part of something and then apply it to something else. Last week, 2 weeks ago, when Lisa was working with her mom over at her sister's house, she called, and there's this soup that I like to make that's super easy. You put 2 cans of corn, 2 cans of ranch style beans, a can of Rotel, and taco meat, and that's all there is to the soup. So she got over there and she told him what it was going to be, and her sister says, well, I'm going to change it. I'm going to add V8 to it. Well, okay, fine. That's your soup now. That's not my soup anymore. My sister always tells me my sister makes the best chocolate chip cookies. And I'm like, how do you do that? They're always perfect. And she said, oh, I just follow the Toll House thing. Yeah, and then what? Well, then I do this, and then I do that. Okay, you're not actually making Toll House cookies like I am reading the package. So we've got to be careful when we start trying to say, okay, we're going to take Lovas's methods and we're going to do them. He was doing one-on-one, 40 hours a week in the home. That's not exactly what we do in schools.
Clark,
and then, yes.
When I was in grad school many years ago, actually, I'm not sure if it was when I was in my undergrad program for special ed or if it was when I was in my master's program for diagnostics. I don't remember, but I was in college and we saw videos of Lovas's work. And I was horrified because of the way the children in the videos were treated. And it was actually Lovas sitting there. It seemed like he was, wearing horn rim glasses and had his dark hair slicked back or something. It was, they seemed very old fashioned. But everybody in the room in my program at the time, and this would have either been late 70s or early or 80s. I don't remember. Like I say, I don't remember which. But the children that were in the program were not kids like children that we think of today with, mild autism or even moderate autism. They were children who had significant autism, lots and lots of stimming behaviors, kids that were noticeably autistic, just from a glimpse. And the aversive approach was radical. I mean, lots of shouting and slapping. And it was disturbing, very disturbing to me to watch. This adult man or his graduate assistants shout and slap children with significant disabilities. It was horrifying. And I just remember thinking at the time, whoever this Lovaas person is, he's a monster, and he is abusing children with disabilities. That's what I thought, 30 to 40 years ago, whenever it was, when I watched these videos as a young student myself. And to think that anybody would subject their child to that, I was horrified. And then years later, as a special educator and an administrator myself, when parents came in and said that they wanted this methodology for their children, I couldn't believe anybody would want that for their child. Well, it works. Well, what does it do? Well, it controls behavior. With what? I mean, I just couldn't believe that it was something that anybody would want for their child. And I know that the methodology that's used now has been tweaked enough that it doesn't include the slaps and some of the shouts and that kind of thing. But even if you watch ABA in practice now, it's this constant repetitive training, if you will. Well, it's discrete trial training. It is training. And in my mind, it's not much more than that. Just training, repetitive, over and over and over. And if that's what you need to teach a particular skill, that's one thing. But to claim that it's changing a child into a person who no longer has a disability, I think that's a huge leap. It may be training out certain kinds of behavior and training almost like a dog or a monkey or some other animal that you're training out of a particular negative behavior or training to do another behavior, but I don't think it's teaching any meaningful behavior at all. It certainly isn't restoring intellect or, typical cognition or anything like that. It's training rote behaviors at a very low level, not higher order thinking at all. That's my opinion, for what it's worth.
Well,
Go ahead.
This is for Dr. Lisa Cabin. So I remember during our law class, we had to read this court case where it was a student with autism that was in a public school. The mother ends up taking him to an autism school where they have ABA.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember all the specifics because, it's been a while since I read that. But
yeah,
it's almost like because the public school didn't have a systematic program in place like ABA, they were found liable. And so it's kind of interesting that the history behind ABA sounds like that could actually not be that great, like what you just said. So it's kind of funny how things are like that,
Very much so. And you may be even referencing, I'm not sure right off which case you're referencing, but it may be the Andrew case, the one that turned the Supreme Court in this last big case that impacted special education in, was it 2017 maybe? It was the last one that impacted special ed, and it was out of Colorado. And it was about, that one was about autism, and it was about a student who had autism, who wasn't making good progress in the public school, who then went to a private school for autism, and the parents were pleased with the progress. And I don't remember if it was ABA in that situation somewhere, but it may have been. That certainly wasn't the first or only case that's been about, parents being more pleased with the treatment of autism in specialized settings, but that may be the one that you're referencing. But to me, it is interesting sometimes what appeals to families that may seem really abhorrent to school personnel. And it may be that sometimes our goals are different. Maybe, what a family is looking for is calm and quiet. And of course, we like that at school too, but with some children with autism, the lack of control, I'm sure, is maddening after a time. And what you want is some controlled behavior, and it can certainly teach that. But as far as purposeful kinds of activity, I haven't seen a lot of that, but that's just me.
Dr. Kevin,
Yes.
the case in Colorado was the IEP and the goals were being brought forward every year and the student wasn't making progress.
Who's talking right now?
Ms. Morvick,
Oh, okay.
can you hear me?
I
Yeah.
think the one I'm thinking of was on the East Coast, maybe Tennessee or the Carolinas or somewhere like that, I believe.
Okay.
But it's, like I said, I don't remember all the details. I just remember, though, they did discuss ABA. And
Okay.
because the first school they were at didn't have any type of program, and I believe the teacher didn't document well, and she just
Okay.
really didn't have a lot to hold up in court. And so they did
Remember
go
that.
against the public school. You remember it, Jean-Ann?
I remember that summer because it was like they only had like some anecdotal evidence, but they had no actual data.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that case.
I'm not remembering that one right off, but Gwen, thank you for reminding me about the Andrew case.
Well, and I mean, really in the 1960s and 70s, think about all the misdiagnosed autism
Oh,
cases
yeah.
that were under his treatment plan of ABA and they weren't really autistic. You know what I mean? Like,
I think you
we've
make a
learned
good
so
point.
much in the last 20 years. I can't imagine what.
Yeah, absolutely. So Clark, go ahead with whatever you
Okay,
have
I guess my
next.
caveat on that is we need to be careful when we take a particular treatment that may have worked with a particular group or in certain circumstances. Be careful about generalizing that it's going to work with everybody. Along with the applied behavior analysis, we've gotten into BCBA. Do we have any BCBAs with us? No, because you would have held up a 5 whenever we did that earlier, wouldn't you?
That's right.
But
And you would have
the-
already crucified me for what I just said. So
The BCBA is the board certified behavior analyst, and it's a certification that you get through this certifying board. It's not that you get it through a college. I mean, you can get training through the colleges and that sort of thing. But it's kind of interesting that these people have begun to be seen as experts. And there was a while that anybody that was trying to get a job in a school to work with behavior needed to have this BCBA certification, even though, it's people that have a lot of experience with FBA or behavior mod or whatever other theory can do just as well. It's also pretty expensive. One thing I looked at today was $18,000 to get this BCBA certification. And there are schools that are offering this along with a degree and that sort of thing. So there's different routes you can go.
And Clark, I
it's-
think that the internship or practicum or whatever you want to call it, the practicum hours, I think are 1,500 hours to become certified. I had an employee a few years ago when I was a director who was working on her BCBA, and it took her a really long time to get those 1,500 hours. But think about it, 1,500 hours. That's an awful lot of one-on-one training.
Yeah.
You would be an expert in it by the time you finished 1,500 hours.
But you take a person who's been working in special ed with behavior for 20 years, and their opinion doesn't count because
Oh.
they don't have the BCBA.
Oh,
You know, we
well,
get into all those sorts of issues.
true.
It's real thing that's really interesting to me. There's not any federal or state law that says ABA must be used. And if you're working in the schools, you need to really be aware of risk associated with specifically incorporating ABA instead of providing positive behavior supports within a behavior intervention plan that is required by law. So we need to look at it. Is this really what's appropriate for this student? Are there broader strategies that would be effective rather than handcuffing myself to say it must be ABA? Is this decision based on the student's needs or the preference of the adult or the advocate who may have spent $18,000 on their ABA and want to be hired to do this? So all those things come into play. And it's also interesting that even though ABA is not required by any state or federal laws, I found 3 hearing officer cases in Texas where the hearing officer has said they need to have ABA. One of the big problems to me with this is the courts have been very careful in the past to say, okay, we're not going to tell you how to teach. I mean, even most schools will tell you, okay, we'll tell you what to teach, but how you teach, that's the art of teaching. That's you. And so that when the state starts, or when a hearing officer starts saying you have to, if this kid's going to come back in, you've got to find an independent specialist that the mom approves to deliver ABA for this student. Scary stuff to me.
And it doesn't seem feasible to me, like with caseloads that that teachers have. When are you going to do ABA for? It just doesn't seem like there's enough time to do ABA.
Yeah, here's one with San Antonio, where the hearing officer said that the district shall provide or contract with a specialist trained in ABA, develop a comprehensive BIP that has ABA in it, include a plan that's specific, and then they told them they had to pay for 425 compensatory hours. So in addition to all this that they're going to have to in the future, they got to do this 425 hours of ABA to make up for what they didn't do in the past. So I think it's rough stuff we're talking about. Here's Richardson right here in the Metroplex.
Dr. Cavan,
And-
who was the court system that said that?
That was a hearing officer within the state of Texas.
So were they through the TEA or were they just like a county judge or what?
Lisa, you want to explain how the hearing officers work?
This is through TEA. If a parent takes exception with something that the district is doing, they file for a due process hearing. And you
Right.
go back to your procedural safeguards and they explain to parents how they need to go about doing that. And then TEA assigns a hearing officer. And most of those hearing officers are former retired attorneys. So most of them have experience in the law. But not all of
They're
them.
not
but
educators.
they're not educators, no, but most of them are lawyers. And the ones that I've come in contact are all attorneys. But they're the ones who then are sent out to the district, and a hearing takes place in the district, and the district has an attorney, and the family usually has an attorney, and they set up what it's very much like a courtroom kind of a situation at the district level. And everybody, you can call witnesses and make statements and all those kinds of things. And the hearing officer is like the judge, and they hear the statements in case and look at all of the evidence, and then they make the decision like a judge would, and decide the case.
Wow. So, so then they don't understand then what Dr. C. Cabin was saying, that like the danger is saying that because you're not using ABA, like it's kind of like they're forcing them to use that methodology, whether it's best or not, because they're not educators.
Well, it would be incumbent upon the district to explain to the hearing officer that their methodology is just as good as the methodology that the parent is putting forth as their choice, and why the district shouldn't have to adhere to that particular type of methodology that the parent is requesting. So the district would need to put forward a good case as to why they don't need to use that preferred methodology.
So this is the last case, and in this one, you can see that the hearing officer told them that they needed to start inviting the BCBA to participate in the ARD meeting for this kid, and then the school had to reimburse to the parents for the cost of the ABA therapy. Now, these hearing officer decisions can be appealed. You can go through the courts and that sort of thing if you want to, but on this particular case, the cost to the district for the ABA therapy reimbursement was $1,200. So in a case like that, the districts, they've paid their attorneys way more than that. So they're thinking, well, just let it go, So I don't know. Just our whole court system's so screwed up to me. Anyway,
Can I add something to that last court case?
sure.
Something that struck me that seemed interesting about that is that for the longest, it's like least restrictive environment. We really try to push that. But it says in that one that he wasn't or I don't know if it was a he or a she, wasn't as successful going into the gen ed classroom and the special education room. I think, is there a way you can go back to that slide, or?
Mhm.
It's almost like the hearing officer is saying, make it a more restrictive environment.
Yeah, student displacement in the regular educational classroom was not a particularly effective environment to support behavioral progress.
And so it kind of just struck me a little bit, because I was like, we're always trying to find that balance of that least restrictive. But in this case, they're wanting a more restrictive, because I guess they're wanting to see a bigger impact, they're wanting to see more progress with the behavior. So that's why they probably feel like it needs to be in a more self-contained type room, maybe.
Right. So they're wanting a more restrictive environment, and the emphasis is not on academics, it's on behavior. There's just a lot of stuff in here that it's very complicated. Good catch.
And certainly one-on-one instruction is much more restrictive, regardless of where it's happening, whether it's in a room with other students or not. But when a student is receiving one-on-one of any sort, that's pretty restrictive, when the student is not allowed to interact with peers, because they're getting all their instruction from one individual in an isolated environment. Not the ideal for students, according to the theories that we usually adhere to in special education.
So we'll jump on now with functional behavioral assessment, and these have a lot of similarities in the theoretical underpinnings and some of those kinds of things. But to me, this is something that makes a lot more sense in the school setting. So the FBA requirements under IDEA, if you have to do an FBA, if a student with special needs demonstrates disruptive behaviors that interfere with his or her learning or the learning of classmates, and requires additional information to provide appropriate educational programming. So if you feel like that you have appropriate programming without the FBA, you don't technically have to do it. I think you'd have a hard time arguing that if the kids continue to have behavior problems. So go ahead and do the FBA. It's required when a behavior violates a code of conduct that results in a change of placement. So if you have to move a child from their current placement to a different placement because of their behavior, you need to do an FBA. If the student is referred to law enforcement, you need to have an FBA. If the student is removed from current placement because of weapon possession, illegal drug possession or use, and or serious bodily injury. Now, serious bodily injury is defined very specifically that a student is maimed, permanently disabled, permanently disfigured. So we're talking serious stuff. We're not talking just a bloody nose from a playground fight. And you can find all of that in the definitions, all of it in the legal framework.
Dr. Kevin, today I actually had an ARD. Is it called manifestation or
Manifestation determination review. Yep.
Yes, it was my very first one to be in. But today, all we did was decide if his disability of basic reading and dyslexia was the root cause of his behavior, because he had so many ISSs, OSSs, and office referrals. Every time now that he has an office referral or something like that, we have to have another ARD. So they're asking now that a behavior specialist come to our school and kind of shadow him and give us some insight on things we can do to help him. Well, his gen ed teacher started an FBA on him. And then I found out after a meeting, she went straight to our principal, who was not in the ARD, our assistant principal was. And I could hear her talking to him through the door. And she was kind of complaining that I hadn't done a BIP, but under my understanding with our district, our LSP, our LSSP is the one that kind of initiates that and collects the data. And then from year to year, once the BIP is in place, then the resource teacher manipulates it and changes it as needed. And so it was just a very weird day with the everything that happened. So I guess my question is the gen ed teacher correct in that I should have done a bit? Because in my mind, there's a process that happens and you get these professionals involved that this is their specialty, you know, especially for a first time BIP on this student with dyslexia, you know.
You're not going to like my answer, but my answer is whatever your district does.
Okay.
Because
Well,
there's not a law that says who has to do it.
okay. And none of my APs or principal yet had said to me, you know, let's start this, because I know, I believe in our district, the first step is the FBA. And then from there, the LSSP kind of gets involved and then they do their evaluations. And then honestly, this boy probably will not be labeled ED. He's kind of just a bad boy and he just likes the attention that he gets. Kids will, this is a fifth grader and like kids will say, I'll pay you $20 if you go start a fight with so-and-so. Okay. So he goes and does it. I mean, that's just what he does. So
You're right. The FBA should come first.
Okay. Good.
And then you develop the behavior intervention plan based on what you learn in the FBA, which is what we're going to be talking about here in a few minutes. Somebody else was trying to talk? No?
It may have been me. I don't know.
Probably.
Probably. I think I was going to say that in most school districts, it is the school psychologist. I don't know what it is in your school, Summer, but I would expect that in Birdville at large, it's the school psychologist. certainly is not usually a special ed teacher that conducts a BIP, I mean, conducts an FBA and does a BIP. So that's where I would just ask for some clarification. It's if it's never been told to you that that's one of your responsibilities, and it's never been described to you how to do that, then I surely wouldn't expect to just know how.
And that
Um,
would have been determined in the ARD. If the gen ed teacher was just going out on our own and doing an FBA, that shouldn't have happened. Is that what you said, Summer? The gen ed teacher was doing an FBA?
Well, what she told me is that she was in the process of getting an FBA together. I said, oh, great, bring that data to this manifestate. Is it called manifestation? I want to make sure I'm saying it.
yeah, a
Yes.
manifestation determination review. But
Yes.
I'm
And
kind of
so,
surprised they only got through one part of it today. Because,
today was just to determine if his disability is like the root cause of his behaviors. And we all decided that and even his gen ed teacher said, honestly, he's a good reader compared to many students in our class. So because he was a transfer student and he's just said dyslexia before that was actually under the umbrella. It was last February when that
Mhm.
district said that. And it said he may have tendencies with basic reading, may have tendencies with fluency. And so the whole FIE on him was very, I don't know, I thought it was interesting because they point blank just said that the disability was dyslexia only. And this was a year ago before dyslexia was actually under the umbrella, in Texas. So
Mhm.
I don't know. The whole thing is just really kind of confusing to me with his transfer ARD paperwork, but we're trying to do the best we can with it, I guess you
Yeah.
could say.
So, Summer, just if I remember correctly, when I was in Birdville, it is the LLSP who's supposed to initiate that behavior analysis. Absolutely. So I do remember that because we don't have that in Eagle Mountain. We don't have if there is, so we're actually hiring them now. So I don't know what they've been doing in the past, but in Birdville for sure, that was her role.
Okay, that's what I thought, because I have been in several ARDs with students that are labeled ED, and the LSSP is very, that's
Yes.
like her main thing. So I did go to an autism training at Region 11 maybe a month ago, and he did say that in very, very rare cases, because he said anyone can actually write a bit. And so I was thinking in the back of my mind, is she trying to pick that 1% where this is a kind of a rare case? But is that right, Dr. Lisa Cavan?
Yes, that's true.
A research
Anyone,
teacher could do that, but it's not really, that's not
anyone
the
can.
norm.
Yeah, anyone can, but like Clark said a minute ago, you want to follow your district procedure. And I think maybe your gen ed teacher there is overly anxious to get that process done and the ball rolling. Maybe she's got some motivation in getting that student out of her class. But sometimes I see that's the case. But I would just make sure, talk to your coordinator or supervisor, whoever, runs things there with your processes, and just say, who does what on this, and what's our procedure, because I'm sure there is one. And I know you all have LSSPs. Every district either has one or two, or has access and contracts with one or two, because there has to be a school psychologist around somewhere to do the things that only they can do. So I know
Yeah,
you
that
all
is their
have cover.
job. That
Yeah.
definitely is their job, and they're really good at it too.
Yeah.
Very good at it.
And so I would just make sure that's their assignment.
In our district, we even have like behavior specialists.
Yeah.
Because I believe whenever we've initiated an FBA in the past, the behavior specialist is the one that kind of keeps in contact with us via email. And so,
And that may
I
be
know
their responsibility in your district. The behavior specialist may be the one that heads up the FBA and writes the BIP. That's the case in some districts. If there are personnel that that have that responsibility as a behavior specialist. That may be their job. So just make sure who does what. But I think maybe the teacher is being a little presumptuous there by going ahead with the FBA on her own. If she's the one writing it, maybe she's just trying to coordinate it.
As a gen ed teacher, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Tell her to stop.
Well, she also
I just
told
say
the
that right now. On
principal-
behalf of all gen ed teachers, she does not know what she's talking about. She needs to stop.
Okay, we probably ought to turn it back to Clark at this point because he's trying to get through all of this before 8. And I'm afraid he's not going to, and then y'all are not going to know everything you need to know. So
Yeah, I'm afraid we're
we'll
not
take
too.
some more questions at the end. But go ahead with what you're going to say, Clark.
Okay. When you're looking at an FBA, you need to think about behaviors. Behaviors serve a purpose, they meet a need. We also know behaviors can be changed. If behaviors can't be changed, what are we doing? And the behavior, as y'all were looking at today, may or may not be related to a child's disability. Also, behaviors don't happen in a vacuum. There's a context around them. So one thing you got to look at is the ABCs, the antecedents, the behaviors, and the consequences. The antecedents are the things that come first, come before that behavior happens. And this is for all behavior. We're not talking just special ed students here. This can help with all relationships, really. The antecedents are the setting events, the thing that happens just right before the action happened, or the behavior happened, are the direct antecedents. But the antecedents that happened earlier, the indirect antecedents, can be just as important. A kid wakes up late, they're running out, trying to grab some cereal on the way out the door, the milk's sour, he gets on the bus and his girlfriend breaks up with him, then he gets to school and he's just ready to hit somebody. A lot of the problem that happened way before school happened. You got the kid that you hand him a math paper and he wads it up and throws it. That's years of frustration in math. So those are indirect antecedents. Look at the timing. If you've got a kid who's on medication, a lot of times you'll start to see issues either toward the end of the day or toward lunchtime, even if they take their meds at lunchtime. What are the circumstances? What people are around? We've got some kids that work better with some teachers than others. We're all familiar with that. Are there certain students that cause this kid to act in a certain way, either better or worse? And look for similarities and differences. You're trying to find a pattern. And we're not looking for causation. I don't want you to think, okay, as teachers, we all like to find the solution. Well, that kid acts the way he does because have you met the mom? Meet the mom, you understand why the kid acts bad. Well, no, we're not doing that. We're looking for correlations at school that are taking place. Behaviors do serve a purpose. They do meet a need. They can be altered. But even though they serve a purpose and they meet a need, that doesn't necessarily mean that the kid knows why he did what he did. I do things all the time. There's sometimes that I think, if I say that, Lisa's going to get mad and we're going to have a fuss. So I shouldn't say it. And then boom, I say it. And I think, man, why'd I do that?
Every time.
What?
Every time. You do it every time.
No, you don't know a lot of them that I don't do. But it's a common problem with people. A guy named Paul that wrote like half the New Testament, he said, what I would do, I do not. And the things I don't want to do, those are the things I do. So this is a problem that has gone on a very long time. So just because the kid doesn't know why, you ask the kid, why'd you do that? He's probably going to say, I don't know. And he probably doesn't, but that doesn't mean it doesn't serve a purpose or meet a need just because he can't articulate what that need is. When we look at purposes of behavior, you have power control, is seeking to control an event or a situation. The next major purpose of behavior is protection, escape, or avoidance. You're trying to avoid a task or an activity or escape a consequence, trying to stop or leave a situation. Attention. Now, we all have a different level of the need for control. Lisa and I are both kind of control freaks, so that kind of leads to button heads sometimes. Escape and avoidance, we all have a certain amount of tolerance for situations, and then we need to get out of them. We all have a certain need for the amount of attention that we receive. And this is how kids kind of discriminate themselves from the group for a period of time. And then we have acceptance or affiliation. This is when we're trying to become a part of the group. And as we become part of that group, there's a mutuality of benefit. So those are the four main purposes or functions of behavior. Remember, we're looking at functional behavioral assessment. So when you're doing that functional behavioral assessment, and you need to be very exact using quotes. This is what the kid says. And that's hard for us a lot of times because we don't want to say the F word and we don't want to write the N word and those kinds of things. But if you're not telling the teacher, if you're not writing down exactly what was said, even in discipline referrals, we don't know how to do those. As a principal in an elementary school, I taught my teachers this: when you send a kid to the office, make sure that you write down exactly what they said. And so this kid comes to me and he's got a discipline referral from this stately old woman who worked at the school, just, a Southern gentlewoman all the way. And she said, here's Tommy. And she wrote on there, he said, "I hate this effing math." And so the kid comes in, he's a third grader. And I say, "Man, Miss Key is so nice. I cannot believe you used the word fucking in front of her." And the kid says, "I would never say that." And I said, "Well, she says right here that you said effing math." And he said, "Yeah, I did. I said effing math." So I go to Miss Key and I said, "Miss Key, what did he actually say?" And she said, "Dr. Cabin, you told us if he said fucking to write fucking. He didn't say fucking, he said effing." So make sure that you're using direct quotes and that you avoid terms like always and never, and avoid judgment in the reports. Just say what happened. Here's 2 discipline referrals that I received from a teacher at one point. "Tommy refuses to do what he's told. He would rather be the class clown." Now, you've probably all seen discipline referrals or heard teachers talk like this, and you think, what's the big deal? He is trying to be the class clown. Well, that's a judgment. You don't know what he's really wanting to do. Cindy is constantly talking. She's always late and never does her work. Well, if Cindy has turned in one assignment all year, you've lied. She's made a liar out of you because she does sometimes do her work, maybe only once, but that's different than never. So how do we straighten that up? Tommy failed to complete 3 of the last 5 assignments. He was told 4 times today to stop making faces. So we're not saying he's the class clown. We're just reporting exactly what happened. And with Cindy was corrected 7 times today for talking without permission. She's been tardy 15 times this semester, and she's missing 8 of 12 assignments. So now it's about facts. It's about numbers. It's not about, do I like Cindy or do I not like Cindy? I don't like Timmy because his brother was in my class. You get rid of all that parental garbage by sticking to the facts and the numbers. Consequences. The C of the ABCs can be positive or negative. What the professional may see as negative, the child may see as positive. There's a story about Lisa's oldest boy, and when the whole Mary Kay Letourneau thing was going on with the teacher that was having relations with the students, he was in what, 4th grade, 3rd grade?
5th grade, I think, yeah.
Okay, and the teacher walked over, put hand on the student's back, and he goes, "Oh, Mary Kay Letourneau." She was greatly offended. All the kids laughed, and Lisa asked him afterward, "Aren't you sorry you did that?" He's like, "No." She said, "Why not?" He says, "Everybody laughed." So it was a very negative thing to the professional, but the kids saw it as positive because he made all his buddies laugh. What's positive for one student may be negative for another. You got little Tommy Troublemaker, and the teacher says, "Tommy, you're going to have to stay in and eat lunch with me in the room." And then little Susie Suckup raises her hand, "Can I eat in your room too? I want to eat with you, teacher." So what's positive for one student may be negative for another. And what's negative today may be positive for another. Tomorrow, little Tommy has to come eat lunch with the teacher. she starts feeling sorry for him. She's got an extra ding dong, says, here, have my extra ding dong. Well, tomorrow it's like, oh, if I stay in it with the teacher, she gives me ding dongs, little Debbie snacks. Yeah. So what starts off negative may turn positive or the other way around. We want to make sure that we're looking at the consequences. Consequences can be arbitrary. These are unrelated to behaviors. They're just made up by someone. And then logical consequence. This is very common sense approach where the connection needs to be evident and explainable. And then natural consequences. This is what happens without intervention. And it's the best teacher, but sometimes it's just too harsh. I remember when my daughters were little, we live on a kind of country street out here that people drive too fast. And, if I just let them walk around in the front yard and they walk out in the street, they get hit by a car, well, that serves them right. They're never going to do that again because now they've learned. No, that's a natural consequence, but it's too harsh. Instead, I can use the logical consequence that as they walk toward the street, I pat them on their little diaper bottom and send them back the other way. And they begin to learn, okay, going toward the street, bad things happen. It's a logical consequence. So when you think about drinking and driving, arbitrary consequence for that is that you get fined. I drink, I drive, money comes out of my bank account. That's an arbitrary thing. The logical consequence is, okay, you're not using your license appropriately, you're going to lose your license. And of course, the natural consequence is that somebody has a wreck, you have injury or death. Those are natural consequences that can occur if this behavior continues. When you're observing, try to be unobtrusive. Watch the ABCs. Look for what happens right before a behavior, what happens after a behavior. Look for things to verify what you've been told. Everybody has a theory. So once you've heard their theories, look for it on your own and develop your own ABC conclusions. Also understand that your very presence in the room, the fact that you are in there observing, is changing the environment. Do your research. Do research on that student. Do research on the disability. The first time I got a kid that had Tourette's syndrome, I was like, I don't know what this is. So you have to do research and figure out if you're looking at, is this behavior going to be related to the disability or not? If I don't even know what the disability is, then need to learn that. All right, let's try real quick. Here's a student that cheats, lies, uses obscene language. They're out of seat. They're off task. They're skipping class. They're crying. They have tears. Is that power, escape, attention, or acceptance? Just hold up 1, 2, 3, or 4. At least I can't see the people, so tell me what we got.
So we've got threes. I see threes. I see a 2. I see a 3. Let's see, 3, 3, 3. I see a bunch of 3s.
Okay. I would think this is probably going to be escape behavior, a 2. The cheating, the lying, the using obscene language will often get you kicked out of class, so you can escape. If you're out of your seat, you're not staying in your seat, you're escaping that task. If you're skipping class, you're definitely escaping. Crying and tears, that's a great tool for students to use to, especially girls can turn on the tears or say that they have have girl things going on, so they need to go to the restroom, and coach is going to let them go because he don't want to know any more about that. Next one, gang-like behavior, lying, cheating, being the class clown, inappropriate sexual behavior, joining a gang.
Got some 4s. 4s.
4s is good. Yep, the whole gang thing, that there's that mutuality of benefit. Argues, has to have the last word, non-compliance with direction, being verbally aggressive, bullying, forcing peers into submission, ignoring reprimands.
Got some 1s.
Yeah. And I had an interesting deal the other day. I had a child that was doing all of these things, and then nobody was buying into it. So he grabbed his phone and ran out the door. And normally you think, okay, leaving, that's an escape behavior, but here it was a power behavior. He was trying everything he could to get a power struggle going. When he couldn't do it, the only thing he had left that he had any power or control over was whether he was there or not. So he ran off. Whining, creating a disturbance, lying, cheating, stealing, obscene language, inappropriate sexual behavior, having tantrums.
Got threes.
Yep, these are attention-seeking behaviors. And notice that some of these behaviors work in several different categories, so you need to look for the whole thing. As we talk about power, don't ever get in a power struggle with a child, and if you do, don't lose. Lisa, do we want to stop there?
How much more do you have?
We haven't even gotten into the BIP yet.
Haven't even gotten into what? Oh, the BIP. Let's save the
Yep.
BIP for next time, okay?
Okay,
Because it's 10 after and I'm
Yeah.
trying to keep it to an hour.
they don't
So
listen fast enough.
they don't, do they? Okay, if you've got questions and you want to hang around for a few minutes, we'll stay around and answer questions. If you need to pop on off and get about your evening, that's fine too. So we'll stop the PowerPoint there for tonight. And we'll pick up on, let's make sure we do BIPs next time, okay though, Clark, even if that's not on the agenda.
All right,
Let's talk about BIPs next time. And so we'll and by the way, that last picture was our granddaughter who just turned 10 over the weekend. So she's a little bit bigger than that now, but she's a cutie and she's a stubborn thing too, just like that donkey she is standing next to. But that's Adelaide Lillian right there. But we'll entertain some questions if anybody has any. Which one of your boys is that, Jean Ann?
This is Bubba. He wanted to see everybody before he went to bed.
So Bubba is his Christian name?
I'm not a Christian. I'm
You're not a Christian.
He's not a Christian. He's only 6 years old.
I'm a
What's your first name?
Jonathan.
Jonathan. That's what I meant when I said Christian name. That's kind of an old-fashioned way to say it. I was being silly mostly.
Look, so how did Miss Weatherby? She knew Jake when he was your age.
I was
He used
just
to
saying,
teach at the same
thinking he's
school.
gotten so big.
Jake, come say hi to Miss Weatherby. Sorry for this impromptu reunion. Hurry up. You probably don't remember her though.
No, he was like in kindergarten, I think.
He was in kindergarten, yeah. Come here. This
And
is
Miss
one of the ladies that
Weatherby-
knew you when you were a kindergartner.
Miss
Right there in
Weatherby's
the
just
middle.
been admitted to the program,
Yay,
Jean Ann.
Oh, so you are doing the diag thing?
Yes, I
Good-
am.
That's right. That's right. Good for you. Hubbard needs it.
We need a full-time one.
For real.
All right.
Okay.
Any
Good night. Say
any
good night.
questions tonight?
Good
Bye.
night.
Y'all all have cute kiddos.
Dr. Kevin,
Yes.
I was at the University of Washington Saturday. My daughter did a college tour.
Oh, really?
And they have his name up, Dr. Lavas. Am I saying it correctly?
Oh, yeah.
And they offer a master's in education. I wrote it down as you were talking. Their master's in education is in the study of autism.
Uh-huh.
And then Texas A&M offers a master's in education in high incidence disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tarleton's is in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis on special education. So
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting that UW, they call it UW, University of Washington, offers a master's in autism itself. And they have his picture and portrait up and like,
Interesting.
I thought it was
you can
interesting.
beat children and be famous.
Yeah.
How did he look in that picture? Was it an old picture? I mean, like a black and white picture?
Yeah, it looked like a 1970s picture, like you would see of the polio vaccine being discovered, or like
Yeah.
it didn't. Yeah,
Because
and I
the-
didn't really dive into the information. We were just touring, and I was like, oh, it's College of Education and the College of Psychology,
Yeah.
but had I known then what I know now, I would have taken pictures and really read it. Yeah,
Yeah. And what's
interesting.
his first name is like
Leonard or
Ivor, isn't it?
Ivor, that's it.
Ivor, yeah.
Ivor. Yeah,
Yep.
it's he sounds like he just stepped out of a haunted house or something. But I don't know. That's not very kind of me, I'm sure. But
You remember that guy that we had in our UNT classes, Ivor Weiner?
yes.
What a horrible name for a guy that works with kids with behavior problems. Ivor Weiner.
Yeah, and he's a professor now somewhere in California. Ivor is that Ivor. Yeah, that was his name, y'all.
You mean Dr. Weiner?
Dr. Weiner. That's
Mhm.
lovely.
Isn't that terrible? But anyway, I just know that I was really struck by the videos that we watched when I was in college. It made a huge impression on me. I've never forgotten it.
You were struck by them, no
I was
pun intended.
I was
right?
struck by the striking is what I was, but
Trina, did you have a question a while ago? I think you got walked all over.
who Summer or who are you talking to?
Trina,
Oh, Trina.
Trina.
Did
I
you
was just, I just wanted to make sure that I can, the video from last week. There is a video on I can watch from last week?
yeah, I posted it
Did I
last
miss-
week.
Okay,
Yeah, I
right.
posted it.
Yes. Thank you.
And I forgot to start this week's video until about the fourth or fifth slide, but y'all are all here, so y'all don't care. But we'll put the PowerPoint up and the video, but it didn't start till, I didn't start the video until he was on.
This is wonderful. I love this face to face and every week. I was like, yes, I get to see everybody in the class.
Well, it helps
Yeah.
me to connect with people. And I know, Samantha, who's in the diagnostician program, said to me when I met with her earlier this week, she says, now I've got a commitment on Wednesday nights with my church youth group. And she says, I'm sorry, I can't make it. Do I need to change that? I said, no. I said, this is not a requirement. And if you can't make it, that's fine. And I noticed Tammy has gotten off.
You
Tammy
should have
told-
said, you put God before me.
I'll stop.
Who's
it.
grading you in this course?
Really?
Me or God?
I need to stop I'm going to stop the recording right now.